بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا وشفيع لذنوبنا وتبيب نفوسنا بالقاسم محمد والصلاة والسلام على أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين إلى قيام يوم الدين. وفقنا الله وإياكم بعلم وعمل صالح إن شاء الله بذكر الصلاة على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. أما بعد، فقد قال الله عز وجل في كتابه الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وكونوا مع الصادقين. آمنا بالله. صدق الله العلي العظيم. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil farajahum. Respected elders, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. The ayah of the Holy Quran is a very straightforward ayah in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala addresses an order in a very explicit manner. It says, O you who believe, ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, O you who believe, what do you have to do? You have to, number one, attaqallaha, develop taqwa. Develop a state of fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to the extent that you are conscious of His presence in every state or in every dimension of your life. And not only that, not only should you and I strive to adhere and reach the state of taqwa, but after reaching that state, we should also وَكُونُوا مَعَ الصَّادِقِينَ, also be amongst those who are truthful. And this ayah resonates in our discussion today. Very much in the sense that there's a particular question that is often asked, a question which is often presented by the Ahl Salaf, by the Salafiyin, or more specifically the Wahhabiyin, as they are better known as. You find, for example, when we speak about the tragedy of Karbala in specific, you find that there are many amongst the Salafis, that there are many amongst the Wahhabis who come forward and they have examined the books of history. And they have come forward and they have said that you, the Ahl Shia, are responsible for the killing of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. We ask why? How did you come to that conclusion? They say, well, first and foremost, if you look into the books of history, you will see that the people of Kufa were those who were actively standing in opposition against Imam Hussein alayhi salam. And the people of Kufa were those who were the Shias of the time. So if you put two and two together, you come to the conclusion that the Shias were the ones responsible for the death and the assassination of Imam Hussein alayhi salam as well as his companions. And of course, our scholars have taken this discussion in its entirety very seriously. As in, were the Shias really responsible for the killing of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, or no? Or that there is more discussion behind these statements. So you find, with regards to our discussion tonight, inshallah, I want to break up the discussion into 4 different areas. Number one, what evidences were used or are used by the Salafiyin or the Wahhabiyin in general to conclude that the Shias were the ones responsible for the killing of Imam Hussein alayhi salam? Number one. Number two, how was the city of Kufa established? And what were the different demographics of the city of Kufa? Number three, with regards to the Shias that existed in Kufa, what type of Shias existed in the city of Kufa? And number four, were there any Shias in the city of Kufa? So let's begin our discussion, inshallah. When you look at the evidences that is there, that is often used by the Salaf or by the Ahl Salaf, which are used to show and conclude that the Shias were responsible for the assassination of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, you'll come across a number of different evidences. And many of these evidences are there within our sources as well, which adds extra layer of ambiguity within this entire discussion. So you find, for example, the first piece of evidence that is used is that on the 10th of Muharram, on the day of Ashura, majority of Umar ibn Sa'ad, majority of the soldiers in the army of Umar ibn Sa'ad were from Kufa. A small minority were from Sham, others were from other cities, but the majority of the numbers, in the thousands that stood in opposition against Abu Abdullah alayhi salam, were from the city of Kufa themselves. So if you were to look at, from a bird's eye view, the army of Umar ibn Sa'ad, it would be comfortable to say, to generalize and say that the majority of them were from Kufa. Number one. Number two, when you read the books of history, you find that Imam Hussein alayhi salam left the city of Medina, the city of his grandfather, migrates towards the city of Mecca to perform Hajj. He is driven out of Mecca and he proceeds towards the city of Kufa. Why does he go towards the city of Kufa? Because to conjure up an army to lead an uprising against Yazid ibn Muawiyah. The fact that the Imam alayhi salam thought it was a good idea to go towards the city of Kufa and to sum up or to congregate an army to lead an uprising against Yazid ibn Muawiyah is proof in itself that there were supporters there for the Imam alayhi salam in Kufa. If the Imam had landed in Kufa before Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad, then the situation would have been much more different. That the Imam alayhi salam would have been able to gather an army and fight against Yazid ibn Muawiyah. But of course, as history explains to us, that the Imam alayhi salam did not reach the city of Kufa. Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad was the one who first reached the city of Kufa. And of course, the rest is very well known amongst yourselves as to what transpired in history. Not only that, you find that when the letters were being sent from the people of Kufa towards the Imam alayhi salam, according to one source, they say 18,000 letters were sent to the Imam. Khawarizmi, a famous Sunni historian, comes forward and he says, no, it wasn't 18,000, it was 25,000 letters that was sent to the Imam alayhi salam, showing their support. Ya Abu Abdullah, Ya ibn Rasulullah, come towards the city of Kufa. We will give you our support and we will lead an uprising against Yazid ibn Muawiyah. Despite the different amounts of letters that was sent to the Imam alayhi salam, what we can comfortably come forward and say is that thousands of letters were sent to the Imam alayhi salam. Thousands of letters to show their support towards him. And of course, you find that when Muslim ibn Aqil was sent towards the city of Kufa, later on, as history tells us, they betrayed him and they were disloyal towards him. This is further evidence to show that the people of Kufa, they were the Shias of Imam Ali alayhi salam. They were the Shias of Imam Hassan. They were the Shias of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Otherwise, they wouldn't have showed support to him in the first place. They showed support to him by writing thousands of letters. Not only that, you have, for example, another piece of evidence, which is the sermon of Bibi Zainab salamullahi alayha. Bibi, when she enters the streets of Kufa after being captured as a captive, chained and shackled, amongst the other ladies from the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, when they enter the Kufa, when she enters the courthouse or the palace of Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad al-La'in, she turns towards him and she turns towards the people of Kufa and she delivers a sermon. When she delivers this sermon, what does she say? She says, you will never, O people of Kufa, you will never be able to wash away your betrayal. She uses this word, betrayal. Betrayal from what? From showing support to their Imam and then later on taking that support away from them. Backing out from supporting him. And you will never be able to wash away the mistakes of your betrayal and your general mistakes for not showing support. You killed Ma'din al-Risala. You are the ones responsible for killing the place upon which revelation descended upon, the household upon which revelation came to. So when you put all of these evidences together, you come to the understanding that the Shias were responsible for the killing of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. And not only that, but they come forward and they say that you Shias are the ones who killed Abu Abdullah alayhi salam. Further than this, you find that many of them go on to make statements saying that when you cry and you mourn and you lament for Abu Abdullah alayhi salam, all of it is rendered futile. All of it is rendered useless. Why? This is because you are responsible for his death. And now, because you are now in the state of nadam, you are now in the state of regret. Now that you realize the mistakes that you made in history, you cry and you lament for Abu Abdullah alayhi salam. That you wish you supported him when you betrayed him. So all of the blame comes back to us, the Shia. And you find that there are multiple, hundreds upon hundreds of TV channels, satellite channels in this world today, sponsored and, of course, financed by a certain madhab to promote the message that the Shias were responsible for the killing of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Not only this, you find that the Ahl al-Salaf, the Wahhabiyun, taking inspiration from the likes of Ibn Taymiyyah, Shaykh al-Islam, taking inspiration from the likes of Muhammad ibn Wahhab, you find that they come forward and they explain and they say that the whole movement of Imam Hussein alayhi salam was a movement to show that Yazid ibn Muawiyah was rightful in his actions. In fact, Abu Abdullah alayhi salam, when he led this uprising against led an uprising against Yazid ibn Muawiyah, he was wrong in his actions. He was wrong in the way he presented himself against the Hakim of his time. In fact, many of them came forward famously with the statement saying that the Imam alayhi salam was killed by the sword of his grandfather. Meaning that if Rasulullah had been alive, he would have stood against Hussein ibn Ali alayhi salam. And so you find this opinion to be pushed forward by majority of these scholars. In fact, some of them even go on to say that Imam Hussein alayhi salam commands no respect and no dignity. Why? This is because he denied the Imam of his time, who was Yazid ibn Muawiyah. The fact that he refused allegiance and bay'at to Yazid shows that he was a man who was in mistake, or he made a serious mistake. In fact, their writers go on to say that Hussein ibn Ali was a stubborn man in nature for standing against Yazid ibn Muawiyah. Furthermore, more so than this, you find that many of them came forward and had the audacity to come forward and say that we love Abu Abdullah alayhi salam more than the Ahl al-Shia. That the Shias of Ali ibn Abi Talib do not love Hussein ibn Ali the way we love Hussein ibn Ali. And this statement, you find that we as the followers of Amir al-Mu'mineen, we should take these statements to our hearts. We should take these statements emotionally and answer them academically as well as emotionally. You find that we came forward and we say these words very, very clearly. We say, number one, when it comes to the Aza of Abu Abdullah alayhi salam, we are willing to first of all give our lives. We are willing to sacrifice our time. We are willing to sacrifice our wealth. Karbala is dear to us than anything else in our hearts. The shrine of Abu Abdullah alayhi salam is dear to us in our hearts than anything else in this world. We are willing to give our lives and our limbs for the ziyarah of Abu Abdullah alayhi salam. And we have protected the shrines of Abu Abdullah alayhi salam throughout the centuries. When you read the history of Karbala, the shrine and the dhari of Abu Abdullah alayhi salam, you find that for many years and many centuries, it has been a victim in the hands of the Taghut, in the hands of many oppressors, in the hands of many dictators and despots who have all yearned to destroy the shrine of Abu Abdullah alayhi salam. Al-Mutawakkil 17 times, as history tells us, tried to demolish the grave of Abu Abdullah alayhi salam. You find, for example, recently in 1991, Saddam Hussein had shot bullets into the shrines of Abu Abdullah alayhi salam. The monuments are still there. The bullet signs are still there to show us as the Zawar of Abu Abdullah alayhi salam that as much as you come and you strike the shrines of Abu Abdullah, the shrine will continue to exist. No, not only that. we will stand in between the shrine and your weapons to protect and to safeguard the shrine of Abu Abdullah alayhi salam. When you look at the mentality, and when you look at, for example, the ideology and the worldview of the Ahl Salaf, what do they come forward and do? When they see a shrine, they are the first ones to demolish that shrine. They are the first ones to come forward and demolish the shrines into rubbles. Look what they've done in the past. When it comes to the grave of Hijr ibn Adi, when it comes to the grave of certain other personalities, you find that they are quick and hasten themselves in demolishing these holy graves or these grave sites. If the power was given to them, the first order of business that they would do is demolish the graves of the saints of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Look what they did in Jannat al-Baqi. When power came into their hands, of the Al Saud, the first order of business was to demolish the grave Al-Baqi', Jannat al-Baqi', to the extent that 4 of our reverend imams, they are buried in those lands and no one can go and visit them. They are the true ghuraba, the strange ones who have been buried and no visitors are allowed to go see them. You find, for example, and therefore, as a brief summary, you find that when the question is raised, who has more love for the Imam alayhi salam, it is clear that the Ahl Shia are the ones who have more love for the Imam alayhi salam. Secondly, not only that, you find that their statement is a statement of rubbish. It's a statement of contradiction. In which way? You find when we ask the question, how is it possible for one heart of the human being to love 2 different personalities? One who is close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but then the other who is far away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One who, for example, loves the messengers of Allah, but then they also love the enemies of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Is it possible for a heart to love Ibrahim, but at the same time love Nimrud? Is this the message of the Holy Quran? You find, for example, is it possible for a heart to love Musa, but then at the same time for this heart to love Fir'aun? Is it possible for one to love Adam, but then to love Shaitan as well? Is it possible to combine 2 loves, or the love for 2 personalities, polar opposites from one another, in one heart? Can this join? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Holy Quran, مَا جَعَلَ اللَّهُ لِرَجُلٍ مِّن قَلْبَيْنِ فِي جَوْفِهِ, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has not made a man who has or possesses 2 hearts. Meaning what? Meaning that when you love one thing, you love that thing in its entirety. You cannot love the opposite of that particular thing. If you love beauty, you cannot love ugliness. When you love Nimrud, you cannot love Ibrahim. When you love Musa, you cannot love Fir'aun. When you love Ali alayhi salam, when you love Rasulullah, you cannot love Muawiyah, and you cannot love Abu Sufyan. Likewise, when you love Hussein ibn Ali, there is no way for you to be able to love Yazid ibn Muawiyah. And this is a fact in itself. So when you come forward and you examine these evidences that are used by them, you come to the understanding that they have a strong argument, which is that the Ahl Shia were the ones responsible for killing Abu Abdullah alayhi salam. And so this arises a question, or this gives rise to a question, and the question is, how exactly was Kufa established? Because in order to understand the demographics of Kufa at the time of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, we need to understand how Kufa developed. Kufa at first was a garrison city. It was a city where all of the armies would get together and they would camp. And then from Kufa they would go and separate into the different areas of the world, wherever they were sent to. But at first Kufa was seen as a garrison city. When Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam became the caliph, you find that one of the things that he did was that he moved his Khilafah to the cities of Kufa. When Rasulullah migrated to the city of Medina, Medina became a political headquarter. Abu Bakr, when he took over the Khilafah, His political power was established in Medina. Likewise, Umar ibn al-Khattab, likewise, Uthman ibn Affan. They established Medina as their headquarters. When Ali alayhi salam took over the Khilafah, he left Medina and he migrated towards the city of Kufa. And he established his dominance, he established his Khilafah in the city of Kufa. Kufa at first was seen as a garrison city. And then so slowly, what happened was there was a lot of trade that took place in the city of Kufa. When trade increased in that land, eventually people began to migrate to that city. It became a financial city in itself. It became a financial headquarters of the Muslim empire. When you have a financial headquarters in a particular country, migration towards that country is large in itself. You find, for example, New York. You find, for example, Tokyo. You find, for example, London. You find, for example, Sydney. All of these places are places of trade. There's financial headquarters in that particular countries. Kufa became one of these financial headquarters. And so many people began to migrate towards the city of Kufa. When they migrated to the city of Kufa, slowly the population of Kufa began to increase. Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam becomes the Muslim leader. He then moves towards the city of Kufa. According to some historians, he moves to the city of Kufa after the Battle of Jamal. When he moves to the city of Kufa, Kufa is no longer a garrison city. Kufa is now considered to be a metropolitan city. When you look towards any metropolitan city in the world, you find that there is not just one group of people who reside in that city. That city becomes attractive to all. Anyone, everyone, they all began migrating towards the city of Kufa. It was populated from people of different backgrounds. You find, for example, on the one hand, you had the Umayyads and the people who followed the Umayyad dynasty. There were people who migrated from Syria, from Sham, and they came and they resided in Kufa. You find people, for example, who were the supporters of the Bani Umayyah. They were there living in the city of Kufa. You had the Christians of Najran. They migrated to the city of Kufa with the hope of expansion in their businesses. You find, for example, the Jews of Medina. Likewise, they migrated towards the city of Kufa. You find, for example, amongst them were the Khawarij, those who had animosity towards Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. They moved towards the city of Kufa. You find, for example, the supporters of the Khilafat al-Rashidin, the people who followed the first three Khulafa, these supporters of the first three Khulafa, they moved towards the city of Kufa. You had people from all different backgrounds who moved towards the city of Kufa. And from amongst them, there were the Shias of the Ahl al-Bayt as well. Those who supported and those who loved Ali ibn Abi Talib, salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi. According to historians themselves, they came forward and they said at least 25 tribes were known to be residing in the city of Kufa from different ideologies, from different backgrounds, from different religions. All of them were coexisting one alongside the other within the city of Kufa. So this whole mentality, the underlying premise that the city of Kufa was populated by the Shias of Ali ibn Abi Talib salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi is wrong in itself. And the evidence to show that the people of Kufa were not from the Ahl al-Bayt, of the supporters of the Ahl al-Bayt, the Shias of Ali ibn Abi Talib, was two narrations or two incidences in particular. Which two incidences? Number one, the incidence of bid'ah. What's the incidence of bid'ah? Or rectifying the bid'ah that existed. It is the rectification of the Taraweeh, the prayers of Taraweeh during the month of Ramadan. They say that when Ali alayhi salam moved his family towards the city of Kufa, he tells, during one of the nights of Ramadan, he tells Imam Hassan, he says to his son, "Oh my son, go towards the mosque of Kufa." And I'm sure many of you, if you've been to Masjid al-Kufa, you will understand that his house, the house of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, was not far from Masjid al-Kufa. Walking distance. So he sends his son, he says, go towards the city of Kufa, the Masjid of Kufa, and tell the people to not engage in Salat al-Taraweeh because this is the Salah which never existed at the time of Rasulullah. It came after Rasulullah. This is bid'ah in itself. And when you see that it is bid'ah in itself, it is not part of the religion of Islam. Imam Hassan alayhi salam goes towards Masjid al-Kufa and he delivers the news that you should not engage in Salat al-Taraweeh because it is bid'ah, it is not part of the religion of Islam. Upon which the people cried out and they said, Wa Umara, Wa Umara. This is the sunnah of Umar. This is the sunnah of the one who was most beloved in the eyes of Rasulullah. Imam Hassan, when he comes back, he approaches his father and he says to him, Ya Abata, they are not willing to listen. Upon which the Imam alayhi salam tells his son, leave them be. So you find the fact that the Imam alayhi salam was willing, was trying, endeavored and struggled to bring back the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi, knowing, or this gives us information that the people were not his followers. The people did not follow his ideology. The people did not follow him as a religious leader. The people were following the sunnah of the khulafa and not the sunnah of Ali ibn Abi Talib. In conclusion, we come to the understanding that the people of Kufa were not from amongst the Shias of Ali ibn Abi Talib salawatullahi wasalamu alayhi. The second piece of evidence is during the 21st of the month of Ramadan. When Ali alayhi salam was struck on the 19th of Ramadan, on the 21st of Ramadan when he left this world, he turns to his sons Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein and he tells them, bury me in the darkest of the night. The way your mother Az-Zahra was buried in the darkest of the night, to the extent that not a single soul knew where she is buried, bury me in the same fashion. Why? So that the Khawarij do not come, exhume my body from my grave and disrespect it. Ali alayhi salam wanted him to be buried, wanted his body to be buried in the darkest of the night in secrecy so that his enemies do not know where he is buried. For many decades, the body of Ali alayhi salam was hidden from the public. It was in the time of Imam Sadiq salawatullahi wasalamuhu alayhi who came forward and said and dictated to his companions that this is the place in Najaf al-Ashraf where the body of my grandfather Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam is buried. Until the time of Imam al-Sadiq, not a single person except for the close members of the Ahlul Bayt knew where the Imam's body was buried. Well, hold on a second. Why did the Imam keep his burial secret? If the people in Kufa were his followers, if the people in Kufa were his Shias, so that they can come and pay respects to his body, they can pay respects to his janazah, for example, none of that transpired. The Imam alayhi salam kept his burial secret. In conclusion, we come to the understanding that the Imam alayhi salam, his interactions with the people of Kufa was not that of the master and his followers or his servants. It was different. The people of Kufa did not follow Ali ibn Abi Talib as a religious leader. The people of Kufa had their reservations towards Ali ibn Abi Talib. And coming back to the fact that Kufa was a metropolitan city, and out of this metropolitan city, a few minorities, a very small proportion of this city were the true followers of Ali ibn Abi Talib salawatullahi wasalamuhu alayhi. And so this brings us to the third area of our discussion, is that if the Shias were in the small minorities, what type of Shias existed in the city of Kufa? Shiism, or the word Shia in the Arabic language, literally means to follow. Following someone can have different interpretations. A person, and with regards to this discussion, there are three interpretations of the word Shia. You can have a person who is Shia by faith. What does that mean, Shia by faith? It means that a person who believes in the wilayah of Ali ibn Abi Talib salawatullahi wasalamuhu alayhi. This person comes forward and he believes that the Imam alayhi salam is the caliph. He believes that the Imam alayhi salam is the rightful leader after the Rasulullah. He believes that when Rasulullah said on Eid al-Ghadir, on the day of Ghadir, in Ghadir Khum, Man kuntum mawla fahadha aliyun mawla, whomsoever I am his master, then this level of masterhood or this level of authority is passed down to Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam, they come forward and they submit to this. They have iman, they believe that Ali ibn Abi Talib is the rightful leader. After the Holy Prophet, after the demise of the Holy Prophet of Islam, they believe that authority in expanding the religion of Islam, explaining the Sharia, explaining the verses and the ayats of the Holy Quran, all comes under the responsibility of Ali ibn Abi Talib. Aban ibn Taghlab, who was one of the companions of Imam Baqir alayhi salam, as well as Imam Sadiq salawatullahi wa salam alayhi, when he begins to describe the word Shia, a person who is Shia by faith, he comes forward and he says something remarkable, very famous hadith. He says that whenever a group of people differ from one another, they always go back and they always refer to Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. In any verdict, if there is a discrepancy, we go back to Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. Whenever there is a disagreement between us from what has come from Ali ibn Abi Talib salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi, we go back to Ja'far as-Sadiq salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi. This is a Shia. This is the Shia by faith. Someone who believes in the wilayah and the authority of Ali ibn Abi Talib after the demise of the Holy Prophet of Islam. Then you have the second notion of Shiism, the second form of Shia, which is Shia in terms of religion, but not politics. What's the meaning behind this? The second type of Shia are those who come forward and say that they believed in the authority of the Ahl al-Bayt as the religious scholars. The ulama al-abrar, as it's known as, that they believe that the Ahl al-Bayt were the foremost authorities in the religion of Islam when it comes to religious affairs. When it comes to the interpretation of the Holy Quran, the Ahl al-Bayt should be referred to. When it comes to the understanding of the Sharia, from what's halal and haram, you refer back to the Ahl al-Bayt alayhim salam. When it comes to akhlaqi guidance, if you want to develop yourself spiritually, if you want to develop yourself from an irfani perspective, spiritual perspective, you go back to the Ahl al-Bayt. You want to become a master in mysticism, you refer back to the Ahl al-Bayt alayhim salam. But when it comes to political affairs, the Ahl al-Bayt have no authority whatsoever. So you found that there were certain members of the Ahl Kufa, there were members in the city of Kufa who believed that the Ahl al-Bayt were religious leaders, but they followed the Khulafa as political leaders. In religion, they are the foremost. But when it comes to political and governmental affairs, they are not the foremost. Rather, there are others who are considered to be the foremost in these areas. Then you had the third type of Shia. What were the third type of Shia? They were the ones who believed in the opposite. They believed that the Ahl al-Bayt were the foremost in politics. They believed the superiority and the preference of Ali ibn Abi Talib above all the other companions of Rasulullah. Political Shiism, this is what is known as political Shiism, explained that the people of Kufa, there were people in Kufa who believed that the Khawarij, who believed that the authority of Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan, who believed that the authority of the people involved in the Battle of Jamal was not as strong, was not as real as the political authority of Ali ibn Abi Talib. So they stood alongside him and they fought alongside him in the Battle of Jamal, in the Battle of Siffin, and in the Battle of Nahrawan. Political Shiism, according to the words of the scholars, historians, the Mu'arrikhin, they came forward and they said that the people of Kufa were those who politically followed Ali ibn Abi Talib. Kufa, the demographics of Kufa, especially the Shias of Kufa, were not those who believed in the wilayah of Ali ibn Abi Talib, nor those who followed Ali ibn Abi Talib in religious affairs, but they were the ones who followed Ali ibn Abi Talib in political affairs. This is something crucial that we need to be mindful of. When we speak about the Shias of Kufa, what that means is that they were the ones who followed the Ahl al-Bayt in political affairs. These letters that were being written, these letters that were being sent to Imam Hussein alayhi salam in the thousands, did not depict the fact that they believed in the authority and the wilayah of Abu Abdullah alayhi salam, but just that they followed him and they were willing to follow him for a political affair, for a political from a political perspective. That support that they gave to Imam Hussein alayhi salam was a political support. They preferred the judgment of the Ahl al-Bayt in political affairs compared to everyone else. In fact, this movement began after Uthman ibn Affan. Uthman ibn Affan, when he became the leader of the Muslim Ummah, a lot of things went wrong. You found certain tribes and certain families were being preferred more so than others. You found the public treasury, money from the Bayt al-Mal, were being given to certain tribes more so than others. It wasn't going to the widows and the orphans and those who were from amongst the elderly, those who were unemployed, those who, for example, deserved it. Rather, it began to go into the pockets of his tribe. The Bani Umayyah, this is how the Bani Umayyah were formed. This is how the Bani Umayyah were being supported by the authority of Uthman ibn Affan. The people could not sit back and see such oppression being done to them, so they went and they supported Ali ibn Abi Talib salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi. But this nowhere does it imply that they supported the Imam alayhi salam religiously. They supported the Imam alayhi salam through Iman, that they went on their knees and they said, we will give bay'at to you because you are the true rightful authority of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala after Rasulullah. Rather, what this meant was that they were willing to support the Imam politically. And as I said, when you refer to the books of history, you come to the conclusion that the people of Kufa, the Shias of Kufa, were those who supported the Ahl al-Bayt on a political level, not on a religious level. And this, of course, comes to explain to us the importance of ilm and amal, something which is constantly reverberated in the Holy Quran, something which is constantly mentioned from the lips of the A'imma alayhim salam as well as our scholars, that when a person supports the Ahl al-Bayt alayhim salam, should support him through Iman, number one, and number two, through amal. That I believe in the authority of Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam, the least I can do is follow his message. The least I can do is follow what he has told me. The least I can do is adhere to what he has made wajib and to refrain from what he has made haram on me. Many of the religious verdicts are not given by the Holy Prophet. Many of the religious verdicts are not mentioned in the Holy Quran. It is expanded by the Ahl al-Bayt alayhim salam. That when I follow them, I follow the Sharia that they have left behind for me. That I read their du'as and I learn from their ahadith. This is what it means to be a Shia of the Ahl al-Bayt alayhim salam. That I study the religion of Islam using their interpretation. That I study the religion of Islam, I study Tawheed, I study Nabuwah, according to their understanding and not no one else's understanding. As we mentioned last night, Rasulullah says, إِنِّي تَارِكٌ فِيكُمُ الثَّقَلَيْنِ كِتَابَ اللَّهِ وَإِتْرَةِ أَهْلَ بَيْتِ. I don't care about what the companions tell me. I care about what the Ahl al-Bayt tell me, because they are placed on the same level as the Quran. If I want to understand Tawheed, as the famous poet says, if I want to understand Tawheed, I should use the words of the Ahl al-Bayt. And I say, as the poet says, he says, Ya Allah, I would have never known you if it wasn't for Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. So, coming back to the discussion, you find that there is a scholar who comes forward and he says that the Shias that were there in Kufa, all of them made it their responsibility to make sure that they were standing alongside Imam Hussein alayhi salam. We come forward and we say Sahih. There were Shias in Kufa. This entire discussion doesn't come forward and tell us that there were no Shias who believed in the wilayah and the authority of Ali ibn Abi Talib. There were those who believed in the authority and the wilayah of Ali ibn Abi Talib. And those who believed in the wilayah of Ali ibn Abi Talib made sure that they were there alongside the Imam alayhi salam on the 10th of Ashura. For those who were not able to be there on the 10th of Ashura, they were either imprisoned, many of them had been executed. Yes, when Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan came into power, you find that the first order of business was to destroy Kufa as the political followers of Ali ibn Abi Talib. What does he do? He keeps strict surveillance upon those who followed Ali alayhi salam. Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad, who became the governor of Kufa, slowly began to spy on the different tribes that were there. And he began to assassinate and kill and imprison the true followers of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. The likes of Mukhtar al-Thaqafi, he was imprisoned. The likes of Hujr ibn Adi, he was assassinated. The likes of Amr ibn al-Hamaq, he was assassinated. These were the true followers of Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. But then you had other members of Kufa who were true supporters, the likes of Habib ibn Madahir. He was a Kufan, but he made sure that his support was there. His underlying support was there for Abu Abdullah alayhi salam on the 10th of Muharram. You have, for example, Burayr. You have, for example, Muslim ibn Awsaja. All of them made sure that they were there standing alongside Abu Abdullah alayhi salam. As the famous scholar comes forward and he says, the true Shias of Ali ibn Abi Talib, the true Shias of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, it is impossible for them to love Abu Abdullah alayhi salam, but then at the same time actively engage in his assassination. The two is a contradiction. How can one person have two hearts where they love the Ahlul Bayt, but then at the same time they are willing to kill the Ahlul Bayt? It doesn't make sense. Either they stand alongside the Ahlul Bayt, give their lives for the Ahlul Bayt, or they kill the Ahlul Bayt. The Shias of Kufa, the Kufans in general, because they were there on the 10th of Muharram willing to kill Abu Abdullah alayhi salam, it comes to tell us that they were not the Shias of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. It doesn't make sense. How can you love someone and kill them at the same time? This is not how we operate as human beings. And therefore, when you, for example, look at the demographics of the army of Umar ibn Sa'd, there were those of different categories. There were those from amongst them who were drowning in their worldly appetites and pleasures. They had no religion in their hearts whatsoever. Then there were those who were low and they were mean and they were wicked individuals. And then there were those who were pursuing their worldly dreams. They lacked any religious conviction. As in, when you ask the question, who is willing to rip the earrings from the ears of Ruqayya and from the ears of Sukayna? Who is willing to strike the neck of an infant? Who is willing to trample on the body of children? Who is willing to cut the pieces of the body of Ali al-Akbar? These were the low, vicious individuals who were not from amongst the lovers of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. And so, in summary, when you understand this propaganda that is thrown in the world today with such force, that the Shias were responsible for the assassination of Abu Abdullah alayhi salam, we come forward with such a lengthy discussion and say that what you say is rubbish. On a night like this, when we get together and commemorate Muslim ibn Aqil, when he was sent to Kufa as the representative of Abu Abdullah alayhi salam, they say that he gathered thousands under him in support to overpower Yazid ibn Muawiyah, to overthrow Ibn Ziyad. But Ibn Ziyad, he was a terrorist in every sense of the definition, a man who only cared about his own desires. They say he came forward cunningly and he pursued the tribes, the leaders, the elders of Kufa. And he said to them, go into the streets of Kufa and tell your people to turn away from Muslim ibn Aqil. The elders of Kufa, they went towards, for example, they went towards their people and they convinced their people to move away from Muslim ibn Aqil. They would convince their brothers, they would convince their sons, they would convince their uncles, walk away from Muslim. Others will take your place. Somebody else will fill your space. The ladies of Kufa slowly came out into the streets and they would say, and they would convince their fathers and their husbands and their sons and their nephews, leave these affairs into the hands of others. Stop showing support to Muslim. Otherwise, Ibn Ziyad will slit your throats, and we do not want you to leave our families. Come home. Others will fill your space. Slowly, one by one, they began to leave Muslim. And all of a sudden, Muslim was left alone. It became dark. It was time for Maghrib. Muslim turns around and he sees that out of thousands, only 30 remain to support him. It was time for Maghrib and he leads the Salah. When he finishes his Salah, he begins to leave the Masjid of Kufa. He moves alongside the river that was there in the masjid. As he exits the mosque, he turns around and he sees that there is no one there to support him anymore. When he turned this way and that way, he saw that there was no one to support him anymore, no one to host him, and no one to invite him in their houses. It was such that if an enemy had come towards Muslim and struck him on the head, there was no one there to assist him. There was no one there to aid him. Muslim hung his head low. Muslim hung his head down. And he began wandering in the different alleys of Kufa. He reaches a house. He sits alongside that house. The elderly woman opens the door of the house. Muslim sends her salams and he says to her, "Oh woman, please give me some water to drink. I am thirsty from wandering in the alleys of Kufa. Give me some water." The woman brings him some water and she gives this water to Muslim. After a while she returns. And she sees Muslim still sitting there. And she says to him, "Oh man, go back to your house. I'm sure your family is waiting for you. I am waiting for my son." And then she leaves him. She comes back later on. She sees that Muslim is still sitting there. And she says to him, "Oh man, you are making me upset. Oh man, you are making me worried. Please leave my door." Upon which Muslim stands up and says to her, "Ya Amat Allah, there is no one for me to go back to. I am a stranger in the city of my uncle Ali ibn Abi Talib. I have no protection here." When this woman hears these words, she says, "Who are you?" The man replies, he says, "I am Muslim ibn Aqil. The people have lied to me and the people have tricked me and they have left me wandering in the streets of Kufa." This woman, she welcomes him in. She says, "I am the supporter of your uncle, Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam." Let's fast forward. What happens? Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad, he finds out where Muslim is. And he sends an army towards him. There is a battle that takes place between him and this army. Muslim becomes tired and the army, they attack him. And then they drag him towards the courthouse of Ibn Ziyad. They drag him towards the palace of Ibn Ziyad. The conversation that takes place between Ibn Ziyad and Muslim is a fundamental, profound discussion. A dialogue. Muslim turns to Ibn Ziyad. He says, "Ibn Ziyad, I have 3 things. Fulfill these 3 wishes of mine." He says, "What's the first?" He says, "I have debts." Ibn Ziyad says, "Your debts are fulfilled." He says, "What's your second wish, Muslim?" Muslim replies, he says, "My second wish is that you give me a Muslim burial." Ibn Ziyad says, "By God, no." He says, "What's your third wish?" He says, "My third wish is that you send a message to my Mawla Hussein ibn Ali. Send him a message and tell him, do not come towards the city of Kufa. There is no support for him from these people." Ibn Ziyad rejects. Then, of course, he gives the order to throw his body from the top of the palace. His body falls onto the ground. The soldiers then come towards his body and tie his legs. Then they began to drag his body in the bazaars of Kufa, as well as the body of Hani ibn Urwa. When the message reaches Abu Abdullah alayhi salam that the body of Muslim was dragged in the streets of Kufa, that the body of Muslim was thrown from the roofs of the palaces of Ibn Ziyad, the Imam begins to cry and the Imam begins to lament. Then he turns to Zainab and he says, Ya Zainab, bring me the children of Muslim, the two sons of Muslim and the daughter of Muslim, Hamida. Ya Hamida. Imam alayhi salam, when he sees this young girl Hamida, he kneels before her. He gets on his knees and he begins to caress her hair. Hamida, she looks up to Abu Abdullah. She says, Yabna Rasulullah, tell me what's happened to my father. Muslim, what happened to my father? Muslim. Abu Abdullah, he looks at Hamida. He says, Ya Hamida, Ya Hamida, why do you say these words? Hamida, she says, Ya Abu Abdullah, Ibn Rasulullah, the way you caress my hair, it is the way you caress the hairs of the orphans. Tell me what's happened to my father. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. سيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون. Let's utilize this time to recite a Fatiha for all our marhumin, inshallah. Surah al-Mubarakat al-Fatiha.